Welcome to the Dragon Table. My name is Karen, and this is going to be my very first top 10 list. If you're new to my channel, I do board game tutorials, and sometimes I do some other kind of random board game videos thrown in as well, but I've never done a top 10 list, so this is pretty exciting. At least for me it is. Not really that exciting for you, but here you are. So this is my top 10 games as of 2:25 p.m. on Friday, February 14th, 2020. My number 10 is Dominion. It's the original deck builder. You start with a deck of 10 cards, some of which have points on them and some of which have money. And you use those cards to build your deck by purchasing cards that are either worth money, worth points, or give you actions throughout the game. On one side of the board, you're going to have, or one side of the table, you're going to have cards that are your money cards and your point cards. And on the other side of the table, you'll have kingdom cards. These are 10 different stacks of cards that can rotate anytime you play the game, which makes it very, very replayable. Even in just the base game box, there are a lot of different kingdom card sets that you can use. So once you start adding in the expansions, there's a lot of replayability. The basis of the game is you have 5 cards in your hand, you can play one action card, and then you can buy one card from the supply. Well, once you start buying action cards, they will let you do extra things, like draw more cards, or have extra money to purchase cards, or take extra actions. So they let you break the basic rules of the game by adding these cards into your deck. So over the course of the game, you add in these kingdom cards, you get money cards, and you get points. Once a certain number of cards have run out in the supply, then everyone will count up the number of victory point cards are in their deck, and whoever has the most points is the winner. The game only takes 20 or 30 minutes to play, and that's probably including setup and counting points at the end. So you can knock out several games in one sitting with no problem, and it's easily taught to a lot of different people. People who haven't played much modern board games really can handle Dominion totally fine. So it's also a good gateway game. So that's why I like Dominion. My number 9 is the Castles of Burgundy. This is point salad. You get a point, you get a point, you get a point. There are a lot of different ways to get points in Castles of Burgundy. The idea is that you're a 15th century prince and you're managing your estate on your own personal player board by placing tiles that gives you benefits, give you points throughout the game. You use dice to control which tiles you can choose from when you're placing them, and you use your dice as actions. Like if you have a 2 and a 4, you can choose to pick a tile from the 2 slots on the main board, or you could place a tile from your reserve into the main part of your player board on a slot that has 2. There are also worker tiles that let you modify the pips on your die to add it like +1 or +2, so you could turn that 2 into a 1 or into a 3, and that gives you some variability. So the tiles that you add to your personal player board will change the way the game goes. You're also trying to sell and ship goods to get points and to get a little bit of money. You don't get very much money in this game. It's very, very tight. I like that every game is different. All of the individual player boards, you can either play so that everyone has the same one, or you can flip them over so that each of them are different. Each of the tiles is very unique. I like being able to kind of sometimes play them for stacking effects. Like you can play a castle tile, which gives you a wild card use, which then lets you play a town hall, which then lets you play another tile for free, and then you've done a whole bunch of stuff on your turn. I really like the use of dice as your workers in the game, and that narrows down your choices of what you can do each turn and informs your decisions. I liked collecting lots of animals of the same type because you can get a lot of points that way. But that's my number 9, Castles of Burgundy. My number 8 is Dixit. Dixit is a hard game to describe. There's a deck of beautiful cards, beautiful artwork. Some of it can be kind of abstract. There's usually a lot of different things going on in the cards. You'll have a hand of cards, and when it's your turn, you pick one of your cards. You don't show it to anybody. And you come up with a word or a phrase that you think describes your card in some way. And you say that out loud. Like, let's say I had a card that I thought looked like Alice in Wonderland. I would say Alice in Wonderland, and I put it face down in front of me. And then everyone else who's playing the game will look at their hand and try and pick a card from their hand that they think looks like Alice in Wonderland. And then they put those face down on the board, or on the table. Then those are all shuffled together, so no one knows which card is which, and they're all laid out, and then each person places a bet on which card they think is the one that the original player put down. As the active player, you do not want everyone to guess your card. If everyone guesses your card, it means your clue is too obvious. But you don't want no one to guess your card, because then it means your clue is too obtuse. You want some of the people to guess your card. That's the way you get the most points in the game. You won't get any points if everyone guesses your card. So that's really fun. I think it's the most fun with a group of people who know each other, because you can use references that everyone's familiar with. If you're playing with a bunch of people who you know are Lord of the Rings fans, then you know you can easily use a Lord of the Rings reference and everyone's going to get it. If I'm playing with my parents, I would never use a Lord of the Rings reference. So you have to keep in mind the group you're playing with. And if you're playing with a variety of ages, older people or younger people, kids, kids can definitely play this game, but their references might be different. So you have to keep that in mind when you're playing. But I love this game. I haven't been able to play it in a while because usually it's just my husband and I, and it is not a two-player game. You need at least 3 to be able to play this and have it work well. So I love Dixit. My number 7 is Stone Age. This is a resource management game set in the Stone Age. You have it's worker placement, so you send workers out to collect resources like wood, wood, clay, stone, and gold. And then however many workers you send out, you roll that many die, and then you divide it by how difficult it is to get that resource. For instance, if you're going for gold, which is the most difficult resource, you could say send 3 workers, roll 3 dice, divide the number by 6, and that's how many gold you get to take home. Wood is the easiest to get, as it's only a 3. So you would divide by 3 to get the wood that you want. Then you use any wood, clay, stone, or gold that you get in order to build huts or to purchase cards, the civilization cards. Those give you points. I like having the die because it adds a nice element of luck to the game. There are things that you can do. You can get tools that will allow you to increase your die roll when you want to. If you almost got enough to get gold and you don't have quite enough, you can use a tool in order to make that die worth more, but you can't use it again the rest of that turn. You can also make more people to make more workers, but if you do that, then it means you have to feed them more. So sometimes you're going to have to send out your workers to go get food in order to feed your people. The end game scoring comes from the civilization cards. Some of them are going to be for the technologies. They have the artwork of like the pottery or writing or the wheel. And you're going to get points for the sets that you have of those of different types. And it'll be the square of how many you have. So if you have 2, it's worth 4. If you have 3 different ones, it's worth 9, and so on. So you can get a lot of points that way. You also get points for a variety of different things, like you can get extra points if you have a lot of people. You can get extra points if you have a lot of tools. So there are different ways to get points at the end of the game, in addition to the points you build up during the game from buying huts. I like the artwork of the game. I like the way it looks. I like rolling the dice out of the cup, and the feeling that you're like, I know I have to roll a 10 here in order to get the wood that I need, in order to buy the card that I need to get, in order to complete my set. And I think that's a fun feeling in a game. So that was my number 7, Stone Age. My number 6 is Terraforming Mars. This is kind of a finance and hand management game that's also an engine builder. So you're jointly working with your other competitors to terraform Mars. You have to increase the oxygen level by a certain amount, you have to put out 9 ocean tiles, and you have to increase the temperature of Mars. And you do this by playing cards. You have to purchase cards into your hand first, and then you have to pay again in order to play the cards. And once you play the cards, most of them have a one-time effect. Some of them have an effect that you can take again as an action each time you have a turn. Other ones have an existing passive effect that happens. Some of those cards are going to be helping you do the terraforming part, and some of them are going to be just point cards, and some of them are going to be building your engine, because you're also trying to do things like build up steel production and titanium production, because those will help you build cards for cheaper. There are also some standard projects on the board that you can always buy or pay for, even if you don't have a card that you want to play. Things like an asteroid that will increase the temperature. You can buy greeneries, which will increase your oxygen level. You get points for the number of greeneries you own, and you also get points for the number of greeneries around each of the cities that you have on Mars. And that is counted up at the end of the game. So you're going to get points during the game, and then there's a little bit of end game scoring based on your greeneries and your cities. The money is tight in this game, so you have to be very careful when you're choosing which cards to buy and which cards to discard. There's an advanced variant of the game where you draft the cards. So normally you get 4 cards and you just choose which ones you want to buy to keep in your hand. In the variant, you have 4 cards, you pick one that you might want to keep, and then you pass them on until everyone has gone around and has 4 cards that they've drafted, and then from those cards, you choose which ones you want to pay for. There's a lot of nuance in the game. I think that it's easier every time you play it. I don't have any experience with the expansions yet. I'm sorry. I know that seems crazy because the expansions have been out for a little while, but I just enjoyed the base game. I also play it solo. I don't have a tutorial for this game, but I do have a video where I give some tips on how to successfully play your first 1 or 2 solo games, and I'll put that link in the description. My number 5 is 7 Wonders Duel. I love 7 Wonders, but I love 7 Wonders Duel even more. It is optimized for 2 players, and it has a really, really unique drafting mechanic. In original 7 Wonders, you have a deck of, or a hand of cards that you draft from. You pick a card and you pass the cards around the table. In 7 Wonders Duel, they're laid out on the table so you can see them all, with about half of them face up and half of them face down. So anytime you pick one, you're going to be revealing something. So part of your choice is not just what's going to be best for you, but what I may or may not be revealing for the next player's turn. But it is another civilization building game, albeit very simple. You start out trying to build up your production. You're also trying to get points from the blue cards. I think those are called the civic cards. But there are 3 different ways you can win. You can win by a science victory, where you get 6 of the science symbols that are available in the game. You can win by military victory, where you push your opponent's military all the way to the back so that they lose all their military points. And then there's also just a point victory, where it gets to the end of the game and you count up all the points that you have. That's the way that I find the game that's the way I find the game ends the most frequently. I have only seen a couple of military victories, and I've seen several science victories, but mostly I see the games going to points. I like getting those cards and stacking them up in front of me and really feeling like I'm building something of a civilization, or at least I'm building something. I'm building an engine, I'm building a powerful thing. Resources are tight, so when you don't have the resource you need for a card, you have to pay the bank for it. In 7 Wonders, the original game, you pay your neighbor for the resource. But in 7 Wonders Duel, you pay based on how many your opponent has of that resource. So the more they have of a brick, the more expensive it is for you to pay for brick if you need it. That's my number 5, 7 Wonders Duel. My number 4 is Lords of Waterdeep. Yes, it is a Euro disguised as a Dungeons and Dragons game. It's also one of my parents' favorite games. We love Lords of Waterdeep. It is a worker placement Euro. There's no getting around that. That's what it is. The theme that it is sitting on top of is Dungeons and Dragons, and you are recruiting wizards, clerics, rogues, and fighters to go out and complete quests. But it is just moving cubes around, so it is very much a Euro. Unless somebody gets too wrapped up in the idea that it's a fantasy game, it's very playable for a lot of different people, for a wide audience. You use your workers to go out and recruit the different types of cubes that you need in order to complete quests. And you also are sometimes going to be wanting to build buildings, because those will give you points as well as access to more things. I will always play this game with both of the expansions in the Scoundrels of Skullport expansion set. It makes the game longer, so if you want a shorter game, you can take those out. But it adds just an extra level of interest and more places for you to go without adding a super high amount of complexity to the game. It just adds the corruption mechanic. So you get points from completing quests. That's the main way you're going to get points in this game. You also may collect a few points here and there from mandatory quests or from the buildings that you own, but most of your points are going to come from completing quests, which will also sometimes give you money and sometimes give you other cubes or other rewards as well. Whatever you do, play your intrigue cards wisely. So that was my number 4, Lords of Waterdeep. My number 3 is Clank, a deck building adventure. And that's exactly what it is. It is a deck building, push your luck dungeon roll. I love deck building. I love dungeon crawls. Push your luck is not my favorite mechanic in a game, but it really works in this one. I love fantasy theming, and it's a little cartoonish in this, but it works really well. So you have a starting deck of 10 cards, and from there you're going to build your deck and add cards to it, and you're going to move around this board. You're trying to collect treasures, you're trying to pick up the largest value artifact that you can, and also trying to pick up tokens that will help you heal or maybe give you more points. All the while trying to avoid the attacks from the dragon that will inevitably come because you're making so much noise down in the dungeon that every time you make noise, for some reason, you have to put clank, which are your cubes, into the clank area on the board. When the dragon attacks, all of the clank in that area, those cubes, get put in the dragon bag, and then they're pulled out, and you take damage if they are pulled out of the dragon bag. So eventually you're going to reach a point where you feel like, you know what, I have no choice but try and get out of this dungeon. Because if you're not above the safe line on the board, if you're still in the depths and you take too much damage, then you're going to be out of the game. If you can get above the safe line, then even if you get knocked out by the dragon, the villagers will still rescue you if you have an artifact in your possession. But the ideal way is for you to get all the way out before you get knocked out, and then you get an additional 20 points for getting out on your own. And when that happens, when somebody gets out of the dungeon, either by being knocked out or by making their way out on their own, like a countdown timer starts for everyone else. So everyone else can't just wander around taking their time in the dungeon. They need to try and get out too. So you can sometimes see when someone has decided to make the turn for home, because they'll start buying cards that are worth points rather than just the cards that are the best suited for their deck. You can see, you'd be like, oh, she's making the turn. Oh, she's making the turn. When people start picking up mysterious tomes, they're making the turn. I love the card variety. I recommend reading the flavor text on the cards because they're really cute. Every game is different because of the wide variety of cards in the deck. I love building my own deck each time. It's always fun when the next card comes up in the dungeon row that you could possibly buy, and it's something that you really want, and you're your fingers crossed hoping that it'll still be there when you come to get it, or when it's your turn to see if you can get it. The expansions are also pretty good. I like the Sunken Treasures expansion the best. It adds some really neat cards. I really like some of the cards that are added in the Sunken Treasures expansion. But I do love a good game of Clank, and that is my parents' favorite game. Who knew? So that is my number 3, Clank, a deck building adventure. My number 2 is Defenders of the Realm. I love Defenders of the Realm. Okay, it's a cooperative game. When I try to explain it to people, I describe it as Pandemic on fantasy steroids. Okay? If you like Pandemic, but you prefer a fantasy theme and you want a slightly longer game, Defenders of the Realm is it. Like, it is it. For one thing, you get really cool individual player powers because you get to pick this really cool card that has, you know, you could be a sorcerer, or you could be a barbarian, or a monk, and it has all these great abilities that you alone will be able to do. They're all very different. I have all the expansions for it, so I have a nice big stack of heroes to choose from. Meanwhile, there are going to be 4 bosses out on the board with minions, and as the game progresses, much like in Pandemic, a hero will take a turn, and then darkness spreads, where the bad guys have a turn, and the bosses might move towards the monarch city, which is like the capital city, and minions will spread. So your job is to go out and defeat the minions, so they don't overrun the land and so they don't overrun monarch city. If you ever would have 4 minions in one space, instead you put a tainted crystal there, and then there's an overrun so that the adjacent areas each get a minion of that color, much like in Pandemic, where there's an outbreak and it spreads to the adjacent areas. The addition of the tainted crystal is challenging, because if it ever happens that there are only 12 tainted crystals in the game, so if you ever have to place more than 12, the game's over. So you can lose by having the land be too tainted. You also lose if you ever have, I believe it's 1 minion of each color in Monarch City, or is it 6? I should know this. A certain number of minions in Monarch City, and if a boss ever gets to the city, then you lose. So you're also out there trying to beat the bosses. The hero cards let you do things like travel by horse, so you can travel extra spaces, maybe travel by magic gate. Sometimes there are other special effects that the cards can have. But the main thing those cards do is they give you die rolls for defeating the bosses. So for the bosses, you need a whole bunch of die rolls usually, because you have to beat them down by a whole bunch of points, or else they're just going to start healing back if you don't defeat them all at once. And the best way to attack a boss is to have more than one hero in one spot, and then you can work together and roll dice to defeat him. And whoever lands the killing blow gets to be that boss's slayer. Like Vorgut is the orc boss. If you land the killing blow on Vorgut, then you become the orc slayer. And you have a special ability now that anytime you initiate combat with minions and there are orc minions present, then the orc minions are automatically destroyed. Once all of the bosses or generals are defeated, then you win the game. It's a challenging game to win, but it's so much fun. I love it. As a cooperative game, it really feels like every turn you are doing something significant. There's never a turn that you feel like you're just sitting in the corner waiting for something to happen. No, you're going to do something, because you've got to go get those minions before they have an overrun, or you've got to go cleanse that taint because you're running out of tainted crystals, or you're trying to work together with someone else to go after one of the generals to take them down. It's a great gaming experience. Like that's a big part of choosing your favorite games, is the experience that you have when playing them, not just the pure mechanics that exist. And this is one of those games that I love for the experience of playing it. I love defeating a general, flipping over his card, and reading the back of it, because we have been victorious. So that is my number 2, Defenders of the Realm. And my number 1 is Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated. Oh, this game. I debated whether to put a legacy game on here or not, but I went, who cares? It's my top 10 list. If you don't like it, then don't listen to it. Clank Legacy was the best gaming experience I've ever had. It's the only time I've ever ranked a game a 10. It is Clank, so it's the basis of Clank. If you know how to play Clank, you can play Clank Legacy. But it adds Choose Your Own Adventure, which is like, since I was a kid, one of my favorite things was Choose Your Own Adventure books. The storyline is written really well. I'm not going to give any spoilers about how the game plays, but there are times that you will add stickers to the board. There are times that you will add new cards. There are new tokens to the game. There are times that you will tear stuff up and get rid of it, and it won't be in your game anymore because of some choice that you made. My husband and I played through the whole thing in like a week. It took us a while, because in the total of all, I'm not going to tell you how many games there were. You might think that you know how many games there are when you open the box. You might be right, you might be wrong. But when we had finished through the complete number of games that we encountered in the way that we played the game, we were just so happy and so satisfied with the way the game went. And there were no, as far as we encountered, mistakes. Like, at all. There was no like incongruities in the storyline. There was no situation where it just didn't make sense to maybe like, oh, well, maybe we should have done this action before this action. It would have made more sense. No, there was none of that. Like it's an amazing feat in game design, in my opinion. I just love it so much. Like, I love it enough that if I had another group of people to play it with, I would buy it and play the whole thing through again, because it was that good. Even my husband was joking about that we should buy it again and play it again, because we wanted to go back and make different decisions and see what would happen. We like the game so much. The other thing that's really nice about it is that when it's done, you can still play it, like for real, not like legacy games. Most legacy games, once you play it through, you're done, and that's it. There are a couple out there that say that you can still play them, but you can't really. This one you can really play. Like you can, I have it over there. I could pull it out and set it up, and we could play a game of Clank Legacy without the legacy part of it, and it still works just as well as a game, just as well as if I were to pull out Clank. Like, it's amazing. I love this game. Obviously, since it's my #1, Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated. Thank you so much for joining me for my very first top 10 list. I hope you found it somewhat entertaining, maybe somewhat useful, maybe somewhat informative. I don't know. But who knows? Maybe I'll do more. We'll see. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for visiting the Dragon Table. I'll see you next time.